Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session around crowdsourcing innovation. And today we are having a topic, bring your own DevOps feature. I thought it was a good idea to actually end this year with this conversation and include the community, how we can contribute and move the needle for DevOps practitioners, professionals, and product companies. The idea behind this conversation is obviously we will crowdsource this and we will ensure that we bring in relevant people into this conversation. So we have invited a few folks from the DevOps Institute. They are experts in their area and they will present their own ideas. And obviously, we are here to kind of listen to their ideas as well as contribute and include it in our perspective moving forward for next year. So, just to kind of ensure that we understand how this works is we have been doing crowdsourcing since a long time in the Canada community of practice perspective, and I thought that it would be a great idea to bring these two communities together. Crowdsourcing to us sounds very interesting. We have been doing crowdsourcing on various initiatives. We have collaborated with entrepreneurs, small medium business enterprises, where we have ensured that we bring in new innovative ideas for experiential learning. It's a new form of collaboration within the DevOps community, as we see. And this talk or this presentation or this event, we intend to highlight the DevOps features to-do list that DevOps champions, leaders, entrepreneurs are working on, and how we can impact in 2022 to move that needle. The strategic intent and vision of crowdsourcing innovation has to be defined early. And that's why we're kind of putting that perspective onto the table that these DevOps features, which we are looking at and bringing as an idea, it's only a starting point. The conversation, the talk, which we are going to highlight, it's like has more exciting and innovative contribution and collaboration moving forward. It's just how we ideate today, and these kind of ideas also would be a starting point for ideating your roadmaps, you're validating the new features, and also ensuring that we all work together at the backlog items of DevOps, and we will explore how it works from a crowdsourcing perspective. So without wasting any time, I would also give the forum to our DevOps ambassadors. Maybe it's good that we introduce ourselves at this point in time. So we'll start with Tracy. Tracy, then if
Hey,
you can actually introduce yourself to the
sure,
community.
sure. So my name is Tracy Van, and I usually go by Trace. Um, let's see. My day job is as an architect and a software engineer, and of course that leads me into all sorts of DevOps and DevSecOps opportunities. I work primarily with the U.S. federal government, but also allies, NATO, etc. I am a DevOps ambassador, have been for, I guess we're coming up on almost the 2-year mark. And it's been an incredible journey of getting to know folks around the world. Even though prior to my working with the federal government, I worked with a global consultancy. It wasn't quite the same because we're working inside our companies. So this has been really a cool opportunity to crowdsource, to have interactions in an open place. So I'm really excited about the conversation today, Garima.
Yeah, we are very grateful that you could join us today, and we cannot wait for listening into your idea about the DevOps backlog or the DevOps feature you're bringing in. Obviously, we have Pavel from Poland. So, Pavel, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. So, thanks. So my name is Paweł Piłosz. I'm happy to be here with you and to try to share the ideas. So I'm lead system engineer, so my job is more related to implement things, but also, trying to design stuff as well. And my current, let's say, assignment is related to teaching others. So I'm leading the Cloud and DevOps Academy at EPAM, and we're trying to shape new batch of people to join this world. Shape kind of on my form, so I'm not sure if this is right. But anyway, as a AWS community builder, you already can know what is my cloud of choice, and I strongly believe that the cloud is like a future for everyone of us, and yeah, that I think it's enough.
Yes, and we would love to hear about your idea. I kind of read through the idea a little bit and I'm already curious about it. But before actually we go into your ideas, I would like to kind of make people understand how this works and what is, the actual intent behind it. So, as I mentioned that we have been doing crowdsourcing since 2-3 years into this community. We have brought some simple yet powerful approaches to crowdsourcing when it comes to validating ideas or developing new features. And this at this point in time, I thought that we had some great backlog items to DevOps. And already you could see that maybe many people have agreed on a common vocabulary what DevOps is. But when you talk to your sponsors, it becomes a little different as you go along in that conversation. So I kind of put some perspective around, the DevOps features in terms of how to pitch in your idea to what kind of sponsor. So if you are pitching your idea of DevOps to a CEO, what it will mean to them would be a culture alignment or a culture fit. But what it offers is future innovation. What is our competitors in this landscape is like functional model, which they have been running as traditionally as their company or an organization. And what products or offering advantage they have is agile planning, organic innovation. This is like one example of how do you pitch your idea towards your audience or sponsor. I would not read this whole slide because this was an intended example just to make you understand how this would work. Now, I think we are at a stage where we can bring these ideas from the ambassadors. So again, I would like to reflect Tracy. What's your idea of DevOps, backlog feature which we have, and how do you pitch it, and who is the sponsor for this?
This is a tough one because I was trying to think holistically about what am I challenged with on a daily basis right now across my clients. And whether they are new in career developers or testers, or whether it is the most senior person or the sponsor, I'm seeing that there's a lack of inclusion and thought diversity where folks tend to stay in their own little sphere. So developers hang out with the developers and the leaders hang out with the leaders. And even though we keep saying that we're going to be cross-functional, we may build a cross-functional sprint team, but we're not doing the vertical slicing that we need. So the concept is to try and build a cultural mindset together through open communication and bringing people together in different types of ways. It's not just the retrospective that matters. It's not just the inside your small pod that matters. It's getting that vertical conversation going and showing people essentially what it's like to walk in the shoes of the other folks in order to build more inclusion and to understand that thought diversity. Without it, we're not seeing all the changes that we want yet, because you still have pockets of goodness, pockets of people doing things. And I'm sure Pavel has experienced this as well, as have you, Garima, as you are helping people to adopt the tools and the technologies. The process helps, but then the culture lags, and sometimes it can really cause things to fall apart.
Yes, I agree completely, and I really love this idea. The thing is that very often our process is definitely behind let's say, our minds and our approach to things, right? And exactly what you said. There is a not necessarily lack of communications. I don't want to go this way, but yes, like two different spheres, or maybe more than two different spheres, where we are talking about different things, really. And then someone need to eat this frog on the end, right? And this thing doesn't build the let's say how to call it to be kind in this case. You may or people can do not feel that they belong somewhere, right? Yeah. So it's kind of part of the journey. I have my own courage in this train, and I'm not connected completely with this.
Well, if you understand, as when I'm in my developer role, if I don't understand how whatever the features that we're working on, how that really affects the bigger picture, I don't feel as connected or as motivated. I'm not necessarily, even if I'm following all of the ceremonies that I need from an agility perspective, and I'm leveraging some best of breed tooling, that only takes me so far. So part of this concept is to have someone or a small group who's really acting as that catalyst between the different vertical slices to bring the conversations forward. I would love for a CEO or a senior manager to sit with a project team for the day. Imagine if they actually sat with the team for the day and understood the pressures every time that there are things being inserted into the backlog that shouldn't be added to a sprint, but people are negotiating and making those changes. That's a really difficult place to be in. So I made up this slide talking about, a digital transformation officer. Somebody is supposed to make a change, and they've tried to go agile and they've tried to do DevOps. But if you can create a culture of innovation and provide ways for people to understand their place and how they start to measure into that. If you measure value, if you understand your value, then you can measure your value. There's a holistic, there's a big mindset change for everybody. There's just so much understanding. And I know it's all cultural, but I got to tell you that it's the people that are making this really hard. I just got to say that.
Yeah, I completely agree, Tracy, with you. And I would like to ask the audience if someone in this audience is a digital transformation officer or want to be the sponsor for this idea, because the whole, concept of crowdsourcing innovation is basically ensuring that we make sense with the continuous features which we are bringing in. So I would like to kind of open this dialogue with the audience around Tracy's idea that what she is referring to as continuous. How are there any sponsors in the audience who would like to kind of engage at this point in time and ask questions to Tracy?
And if not, we can connect offline as well, and we can keep moving this forward through the community. So,
right.
Hi, Tracy. My name's Bill Turner. Just a quick question. Something, it's a little bit of a flip flop, but what I did many years ago with my engineers is, because we can, as technical folks, we can always build every spec that's written down. And in a lot of cases, we were building banking software. Only 20% of the spec ever got used. So, but as the guy cutting the checks at the same time, writing code for 100% of the spec, what I started to do is I would bring my developers in to meet the customers, to listen to the customer's perspective on it, because typically developers are so much smarter from a technical perspective, and just from usability, their approach to the world is so much different than the actual end user. So I believe it's very similar to what you're saying, but from a different angle where,
Mhm.
you're getting the actual users, because my biggest challenge at the end of the day is it's got to work. No
I
ifs,
agree
ands,
with
or
what you're
buts.
saying, Bill. You are talking about that feedback loop, and how do we make sure that the feedback is coming rapidly so that your devs know exactly who they're building for and why they're building it. And so this is a complement to that, but inside the organization, kind of going horizontally, because I don't want to take away from that feedback. That feedback has to be there. What feature do I need to build? Why am I building it? Contextualizing the actual nuances of it. But if I'm part of a company that has a new product line and I don't really understand the bigger product line, or if it's something where culturally I don't understand, is it really all about the money? Is it all about reducing, I don't know, spend? Is it all, if I don't really know how I am plugging into that, I'm also not as likely to want to jump on that bandwagon. I'm not going to work that extra weekend that we need to hit the end of our sprint if I don't really feel compelled and a part of it. So it's a variation on the same concept that you're talking about, Bill. So I really agree. I like where you're going with this idea that it is a very similar need.
Right. And I don't know if you introduced to Bill. Bill is a very seasoned professional in Canadian market. He has done business development and sales for large and medium enterprises, instrumental in bringing a lot of DevOps companies into Canada. So obviously you have got the attention of the right sponsor here. So I would like to kind of also reflect on one more question, which is in the chat. That's Tracy Reagan, and I hope that for the interest of the audience, I would just read out the question, and then you have already answered, I guess, Tracy, as we speak. That who would this person work under at the team level or at the architecture level?
So I don't see it as beholden to any one group. I see this as a facilitative role. Obviously, they would need to have access. So it has to be a trust relationship. They have to understand the processes and probably be watching the processes. It's a facilitative role, not a managing role per se, but I don't see them as sitting with a specific team. But that's why I use the term the elevator. You got to slide up and down the elevator. So they have to be, understanding the different pieces and parts and be able to take and talk with practical, tactical, and then tie that to strategy and vice versa. So I think it's going to be a funded role in big organizations. In small organizations, I think it will be a little bit more grassroots. It could be somebody who is leading some of the agility areas, because they would have that a lot of those capabilities, right? You have to be, if you're a scrum master, if you're leading agility, you're a good communicator and you have that visibility into what stakeholders want. So I would anticipate it would fall into one of those roles, that it would either be funded or it would be come from the agility side, agility enablement side of the organization.
Right.
And
And I have one more question, Tracy, to you
Mhm.
before we move to Pavel, unless anyone has any other question. So let me be devil's advocate here, and I would ask you a question: that what is the sponsorship you're looking for? What investment does it need as an organization to enable this feature for DevOps?
Well, I was thinking of this more from concept in terms of having the skeleton or the straw man baked out, so thought through, so that when the opportunity presents, that we have that ability to leverage that. So I thought of this more as a thought leadership piece that becomes part of the body of knowledge, the DevOps body of knowledge, so that folks would be able to leverage this. So I'm not sure. I hadn't thought about it in terms of real investment from that perspective. I don't know.
Okay, so I think you already answered this question in a way in the previous dialogue when you said that in big organizations it will be a funded role. In small medium enterprises, maybe it's a grassroots journey we'll have to follow, and then we'll have to entice people with the toolkit of this continuous journey which you're talking about. But let's move on. I think,
Thank you.
Pavel, you are here with your great idea on policy control, and I cannot wait to listen into this idea.
I hope you will be not disappointed. So what I thought about, we have like two others idea here, great ideas, one from Tracy, second from Angel, and I thought about different approach to make things interesting still, right? So from the, let's say, technical, from the perspective of engineering, right? Not DevOps as full picture, but just engineering. So let's be short-sighted. And I thought, what is missing here, right? What we as engineers we can really like to have. And I came with the idea that in many cloud environments, we are working with policies, right? With IAM roles, IAM policies, whatever cloud is calling them. There is always about access, right? And one of the approaches, of the best approaches, is to have least privileges access. It means that when you create your policy, you should limit this policy as much as possible. In other words, one resource access to one other resource. That's it, nothing more, right? So I'm not creating an access to, for example, I don't know, all storages. I'm not creating a policy where I say, all right, so I have access here, there, and whatever else, right? So like a dozen of places. I'm creating one-to-one access policy. And now I was thinking how many times I saw this kind of policy in the real world, not just on paper, right? And honestly speaking, it's still like a unicorn, right? It not that often you can spot it. Many people say that yes, we are using it, but it means that we have one or two of that kind of policies, and rest is just one policy for everything, or somehow limited, but still not working this way. So I was thinking, as we have so many tools right now related to infrastructure as code, related to our pipelines, specs, controllers, and other elements of improving our process inside the pipelines, right? And we can, we can lint our templates. We can check the security, let's say, security stuff in our templates. We can check almost everything, but still, we are not really checking what is in policies. I mean, we have like open policy agents, etc., but this is different stuff. We are not checking the, let's say, the quality of our single policy in the template, right? And so this is the one aspect of my idea. Second is I'm thinking about kind of generator, right? So I can put information. All right, I have resource A, I have resources B, C, D, E, etc. And based on this, let's call it automation, can create proper policies for me, right? Something kind of similar what SAM model from AWS is doing for access policies for AWS Lambda, right? I don't need, yes, I know I talk a lot, Tracy.
Now, I want to make sure that I understand it. So the idea so far is kind of policy as code. So is it
Yeah.
is it a policy? Because there are some kickstarts in that area right now. I'm not sure if you've looked at. I'm wondering, does this build on policy, existing policy, or is it doing something where it is using AI to determine and suggest what policy should be? Trying to figure out in my head how I would use it. Would I create templates and feed it on what my policy should be, and then it will run. It will be the it would be the enforcer of those policies.
That's a good question. So what I'm thinking about is more like a generator which will be able to go through your template, infrastructure as code template, and determine what kind of policies/connections between those resources are needed.
Okay.
And based on this, I don't need to create one big policy for myself and put their information, all right, give me the read access to S3 bucket, read and write access to DynamoDB, etc., etc., etc. But this will be created for me, right? In this list privilege form, right? And I'm not only have this automated, but also controlled, right? So first of all, I don't need to spend too much time on creating policies, which are kind of pain for any engineer who need to write those policies down in infrastructure as code. Second, we can have not only automation, but security scans based on this, where we can keep the form, the quality, and things even like naming convention proper for these policies. Because on the end of the day, we are creating too many too open policies, right? So in other words, this is the idea to avoid this situation, right?
This is actually looking like to be a great idea, because you know what, there are two things which you're doing with this. The first is controlling the lifespan of the policies, which in large enterprises is always an issue. You know how many legacy policies we have, and we can't just get rid of it because somebody might be using it. And you know, you have to do screen test, and you know, you have to do so many other things to kind of ensure that you know you can get rid of those kind of lingering policies. So that's one aspect. The second aspect is dynamically, you know, how you use dynamic policy allocation to for the purpose, you know, purpose built policies, rather than kind of having static policies, which will ensure, you know, obviously it's not fit for purpose, and obviously it creates a huge toil in the organization if you're talking about big large enterprises. So I kind of see these two values in the idea. Of course, this idea needs to kind of also go hand in hand with what Tracy had said. And obviously, I'm not a DevSecOps expert. I would rely on Tracy, you to kind of curate this further. That do we build this with a product, or do we actually have it as a separate feature or something like that?
So that's a very good question, and I started to think about this when you asked this to Tracy, and I thought, oh, okay, I have no idea now. But you know, I would like to see this as a let's say pluggable thing, which I can plug into my pipelines to control what I'm doing, but also as and this is the most tricky part, because I have completely no idea how to approach this. To have this as a part of the infrastructure as code framework, when I don't need to decide and define this policy by myself, right? But let's say as proper DevOps DevOps engineer will say, automation will do it for me. And now I don't have any idea how, but the truth is that this is the biggest issue in this idea. So how I can build it, right? Because as I said, for example, SAM model from AWS is attaching kind of defaults policies already created, right? Or can create but some policies, but those policies are very basic and very default. Here we are talking about more complicated situation and more interesting, I would say, because I don't want to cover just basic scenarios because this is useless and nobody is building just simple application, right? But I'm thinking about something more complicated, and as the part of the controller in the pipeline is easier, right? Because this will be easy. We are going through YAML or JSON file, and we can check what is there.
Template based.
Yeah, but the problem is how to how to approach this with creation of it. So here I have no idea at this moment.
I'm wondering if I'm thinking about, so I'm jumping to tooling that could be helpful for this. I've recently been playing with the CDK from AWS for templating, and it allows you to have an object-oriented mindset, and so that you can very much create smaller abstractions, repeatability of that, which is one of the problems. Like I've had teams who've created these amazing CloudFormation templates that are unmanageable, unmaintainable, and therefore the policy gets lost. The additional things that they're doing get lost, and it takes somebody looking, opening up the workbench and understanding it. So that might be a way to jumpstart it. And then I'm wondering if you understand what your definition is, understanding how it gets defined, it becomes easier to audit. Look for it in the pipeline and then be watching for it in production.
Yes, I had even a crazy idea. You can have, for example, if you have the template, right, you can have the field there like depends, right, and there you can have write depends and read depends or things like this, and by the list of resources which your resources dependent on, this may create this bunch of policies, right?
There's an open source effort that I have a team that is using OpenShift, and as part of using OCP, the OpenShift container platform, they are using the open policy agent. So, I mean, and that might be an additional open source way to fulfill, because they're using that in their, specifically in production. And so it is doing policy monitoring from that perspective.
So did you see this as a competitor, Tracy, to this idea, the open policy which you're referring to?
No, anytime we come out with an idea like this, the first thing that I always do is a quick scan of what's there and where people's heads are at and what they're thinking about. So I'm just pulling out of my pensive. I'm just pulling out a couple of ideas from recent things. I don't know if it would be a competitor as much as how we choose to leverage them in a unique way that other people can repeat, because this is all about repeatability, right? We want to make something, whether it's a template, whether it's a pattern, whether it's a pay for tool, it doesn't matter, but we want it to be repeatable and consumable. So I don't know until we draw some pictures. Right. That's where my head goes.
Right. So I think, at this point in time, I would ask the audience if anyone has, interest in developing this idea further, any kind of collaborators here who can take this idea. Of course, I see some possibilities, Pavel, with this in the context where we work together. So it's also kind of, ensuring that all these ideas don't get lost. It's not only, we are having this conversation and then we go for Christmas break. So anyone in the audience wants to develop and further has interest in knowing what this idea is all about?
Hi, Grima. It's Bill again. I no longer am a developer. I haven't for almost 20 years, but I am very interested in continually learning on how to actually make all of this world work together with the existing environments that the enterprise customers still have in place. One question I have is one of the user groups that I belong to, and it's all technical guys. They talk about having to basically reinvent the wheel each time they go into a new customer because the policy of the organization does not allow them to reuse stuff they're already posted up or have up in GitOps. GitOps, yeah, whichever one. And I'm just curious, is that because it's all based on open source and you have to net new each time you go into a customer, or once it becomes a little bit more of a baked product, then you can reuse it? How is that affecting the evolution of your lives?
That's a huge, really big question. It depends on the policies and the regulations of the whatever business that I'm working with on what I can bring with me and what I can't. Sometimes lots of jump starts, you bring the jump starts with you and then you tailor them from there. But I think that that's also a time where if we're running really fast and we're bringing a lot of assets with us, we don't always, I'm seeing that we don't always take the time to really understand the context of where we are. So I bring it with me and I say, this is really going to work really well. And so we use it and I jumpstart with it. And it turns out if I'd spent a little bit more time surveying, doing that real quick check up front to make sure that it was as relevant and as tailored as possible. So I think that that's a piece of it. It also depends on the policy. If I'm in fintech, right, if I'm working in finance, and that's going to be different than if I'm working with insurance, which is going to be different than if I'm working with healthcare. So there, and countries, international, all of those pieces and parts, plus the corporate policies, depending on how big or small your company is, you get into a lot of interesting cultural meshing when you start to look across all the different policies, which I think is exactly why this is a neat idea, to be able to say quite clearly, here's my codified policies. Here they are, here they're codified. Here's how they're being audited for in the pipeline. Here's how they are being enforced in production. So I think it's a great idea. I'd like to figure out how I'd love to stay connected with Powell and y'all as you start to figure this one out. Because I think there are probably some interesting in-flight tools that you may be able to leverage for this purpose packaged.
You know, that the thing here is that very often, especially security teams are looking and are trying to avoid the situation where developers or whoever, right, who is joining the project, who is joining the company, they are bringing their own policies. Here I'm saying about the policies for the resources in their own templates for infrastructure as code, right? Because the most common problem, let's say, I see is that no one wants to avoid a situation when the policies are too open, right? And we have tendency to create too open policies because it's easier, just easier. And I just open everything here just to test it, right? Right? Just to test it. And what happened next, right? It become the standard, let's say. Of course, I'm saying right now about the most crazy and unpleasant scenario that this too open policy stays forever. But security teams mainly, what I saw in my career, mainly are focused on the policies. Do not have to open policies because we have standards, we have this standard, that standard, we have our own standard, our own modification of other own standard, etc., etc., etc. Right? That's why we cannot even approach to this that, okay, I have this feature to build, I've done it for 5 companies before, but I cannot implement my template just like this because I have to rework everything to meet the policies in the companies, right? But in the situation when I can say, all right, this is the standard, this is the black box, which is checking, and not only checking, but controlling, creating all policies for the platform I'm building, it gives the maybe better understanding, more trust from the beginning, from the security teams, because it is like a standard, right? This is something what was already done for someone, and probably it works, right? So it's not just implemented by carbon-based computer humans, but it is implemented by silicon-based computer, right? So probability of error is lower, and probability of this going shortcuts is also lower, right? So somehow this may be the answer. Somehow this may be the thing which can speed up the things, especially when we implementing something new. Hopefully it is.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I kind of agree to what you're saying, and I have seen in my day-to-day work that how many times we have exemption requests and policies, and it just lives and goes forever, and how much work it has created. And I'm talking about these large enterprises where you have thousands of policies.